Let's move on. Good evening and welcome to the Capital Improvement Projects Workshop Special Meeting of the Governing Body. Open the meeting, Mr. City Manager.
Well, this is always an exciting time of the year when we start talking about our capital improvement projects. And so tonight we will kick that off. Staff will be presenting information on several different topics and hopefully we have great discussion. And I feel very confident in the work that they've done to get the CIP prepared. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Wade, our Finance Director.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. CIP is always a fun time, as City Manager has said. What's important to note is there's a bunch of people off my right shoulder, my left shoulder that have put a lot of work into this. So not only do I have Adam Bond here to my left, but the rest of the finance team, the deputy directors that are here from Public Works and Utilities and other departments have put a ton of work into this. So this is a team effort that we're proud to present. Tonight we will focus on two specific areas: developing neighborhoods and investing infrastructure. In your hard copy books, we're talking about pages 14 to 95 that we will focus on tonight. If you're looking at it on the PDF online, it's pages 19 to 100. Today we should be seeing there we go. So tonight we'll run through a quick overview of how to look at the CIP pages. Everybody, I think, has seen these before, but for those at home, we wanted to make sure that you have a chance to understand how these are put together, how the project pages are put together. We have bundled these this year by initiatives. As you know, the council has put together 5 major initiatives, and so the CIP has been put together with those. And so first of all, what is a CIP? CIP is a capital improvement plan. This is a long-range plan for maintenance and development of city assets and infrastructure. We look at it in a fashion to where one of the following criteria must be met, as is on your screen. It must be real property acquisition, construction of new facilities or additions to existing facilities costing a minimum of $50,000, remodeling, repair of interior or exterior of any facility exceeding $25,000, infrastructure projects and IT systems that cost a minimum of $50,000, and finally, any multi-year phased project. The capital improvement plan gets split up a couple different ways. The first 3 years are what we refer to as the capital improvement budget, or the CIB. When we start talking about CIB and CIP, it gets really confusing really fast. So the 3 years is the capital improvement budget. That means those are projects that are underway. Those we're asking for funding authority to proceed with those projects. And then the following years are projects that are on the horizon, projects that we would like your consideration to have being done that will appear in the CIB in future years. Resolution 8831 that you passed says that a cross-departmental team will review and make recommendations of the CIP program to the city manager. Of note, the team will prioritize projects by a set of deterministic criteria. That criteria is new this year, and so we have incorporated a scoring system that ranks them on a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being the best, 0 being the worst. That the matrix that's on your screen right now, which is impossible to read, gives you an idea of the system that we went through to score these projects. So we looked at time and location, how critical was the need. We looked at infrastructure, council priority, impact on operational budget. If it was going to save money in the long term, that would score better than something that was going to cost money. Equity and external funding. Project pages that are in your book, and this is the project pages that start on page 14, are broken up into several different sections. The top one is gives you an indication of money that was currently in the CIB, money that was previously approved, and then total project costs for the request. In the middle, you look at a project description, justification, and history. This is where the request says to the council, this is why we need the project. Following that is where the cost breakdown. You'll see project estimates and financing sources. This tells us whether or not it is utility right-of-way, if it's technology, if it's contingency, and then what type of funding is being requested. Is it geo bond? Is it revenue bonds? Is it federal funds? Is it half-cent sales tax? The 5 priorities that the council has previously approved: investing in infrastructure, quality of life, good governance, public safety, and developing neighborhoods. You'll see on your screen now, which is also on CIP page 1. CIP page 1 breaks down those requests by dollar amount for each one of those initiatives. Funding sources, because of ARPA this year, you'll see funding sources are a little bit different, and this is so that we can adhere to bond council regulations in case we make a decision later to move something from ARPA to bonding or from bonding to ARPA. So what you'll see are geo bonds and or ARPA. You'll see geo bonds special. So we have a couple of 3 specific items that we want to talk to you about tonight that would not fall under our normal geo bonds. They're big ticket items. Revenue bonds and or ARPA, again, so that we could move back and forth if necessary. We have our Fix Our Street sales tax, that half-cent sales tax, countywide JADO sales tax, operating funds such as stormwater, wastewater, parking, IT, and then federal funds. In 2016, the governing body implemented a 3-year cap on general obligation bonds of $27 million, so an average of $9 million a year. The governing body increased that cap to $11 million for the periods of 2020 through 2022. And then ARPA, if you'll recall, we received just under $46 million for ARPA funds. The council voted in January, met in January, and made the decision to allocate just under $36 million for infrastructure. The impact of that specifically can be found on page 11. So you'll see for the planned GEO ARPA allocation on page 11, this is in your hard copy book. Not a lot of money in 21, not a lot of money in 22, and that's because those are projects that we have moved over to ARPA and not geo bonding. So you can see the impact of what that $36 million has done. For geo bonds, the breakout is on page 12, which if you're looking at it online, if any of the council members are looking at it on a PDF, that's page 17. But this shows you the breakout of geo bonds. And so we talked about there being a geo bonds and a special geo bonds. You'll see for the top section, just under about $1.4 million is what's being requested for geo bonds in 2023. $1.7 million in 2024. And then you see us get back to the normal $9 to $11 million a year after that, because the ARPA money then would have been exhausted. Down below, I told you there were 3 projects. We'll talk about those here in a little bit. The Pulp Quincy project is one of those 3. Council has previously authorized $20 million for the Pulp Quincy viaduct. We know that between some street work and some utility work that is not applied, they're not applying credit for our expenses on it from KDOT. We have about $7 million above that 20. So total Pulp Quincy, City Manager, I believe we're running at about $27 million. So you'll see in this year's CIP an additional $7 million beyond what you have already authorized. That is one of those special geo bond components. A second component is fleet building. So our fleet facility is being displaced because of Pulp Quincy. And so we're looking at alternatives to blending our fleet buildings together. Those projects have been estimated anywhere from, I think, $6 to $9 million. So there's a $9 million price tag in this year's CIP. My understanding is that there is a sense of urgency to that, as KDOT is looking to begin some projects in 23. Is that right, City Manager?
We'll start some of the demo processes in June, and then utility work in 23.
So there is a sense of urgency to that. And the last of the 3 large ticket items that we are presenting to you this evening is HVAC for both sides of the municipal building. So this is both the side that we sit on currently, as well as the City Hall side. That project is running about $10 million. Of note for that, if you recall a year ago, when we presented some building scores, scored from 1 to 5, 1 being poor, 5 being in top-notch condition. The consultation on this HVAC rated a 1, which is the worst score, and it was also deemed to be a fire hazard. New projects, which is on printed page 13. So on printed page 13 are new projects in the CIP book. Those are also broken down by initiative, developing neighborhoods, investing in infrastructure, and good governance. Dreams 3 is new to the CIP this year. Councilwoman Hiller, you've had some meetings with the city manager, and we had a meeting earlier today. I think there'll be some discussions as far as what the actual dollar amount needs to be in the CIP, but that Dreams Grant program is new this year. New this year is South Kansas Avenue from 4th to 6th. That is a Fix Our Streets sales tax money project. A request this year for a salt brine maker. This has both ecological and economic benefits to the city. The liquid brine, the salt maker uses 75% less salt than dry, so better on our cars and on the streets. We currently pay 95 cents a gallon for pre-mixed brine. If we make it ourselves, it's about 28 cents a gallon. That's an estimated savings of around $50,000 a year. The price that is in the CIP this year is probably a little understated. It's the price tag for the equipment itself, but it does not include, for example, some plumbing and some auxiliary products. So when we get to that project table, we'll speak a little more to that. You'll note in the CIP book an item for desktop virtualization. We're really looking ahead and setting the table. I don't think we're going to specifically ask for funding this year on it. IT is looking at it and exploring the benefits of basically cloud-based computing instead of having towers sitting on one's desk. We think that's coming in the next year or two, but we want to put that in front of you for consideration for the future. This council has heard a fair amount of conversation about PCI ratings, Pavement Condition Index. We did a PCI scoring in 2016. We did it again in 2019. We're scheduled to do it later this year here in 22. It is a 0 to 100 scale, 0 being a failed street, 100 being a new street. And so streets with a PCI lower than 55 are in need of major rehabilitation or reconstruction. So when we look at projects for this year on your screen, which is also, this one is not in your book, so this is on your screen only. You'll see PCI scoring ranging from 32, which is poor, to 76, which I think is scoring out at satisfactory. You'll see South Topeka Boulevard from 21st to 29th scores a 32. That's a poor street. You'll see South Topeka Boulevard from 29th to 37th, which scores up in satisfactory. Trying to apply data to these requests. In the book this year, these are items of note. The North Topeka Wastewater treatment plant for nutrient removal, previously approved and authorized, has been a little over $6 million. We're asking for about $10 million in new revenue bond money and new operating fund expenses of about $2 million. We'll get into these projects in depth as you have questions. Disinfection modification. This is for the water treatment plant, previously approved and authorized, just under $12 million. Previously approved revenue bond money in the CIB, again, that's the first 3 years, $8 million. New revenue bond money in the CIB, so this is new requested money, just under $2.4 million. The West Plant Basin Rehabilitation. We believe this to be critical for clean water. This sets up a project coming in a couple of years. That's a very quick, high-level overview of the book that's in front of you, and certainly would entertain any questions at this point.
Looking around the room. Councilman Dobler?
Steve, is KDOT paying the city anything for the loss of the fleet maintenance building?
Yes, sir. I think that contract is still under negotiation.
Okay, so you're probably not at liberty to say how much, but I assume that would be applied directly to the 9 million?
Boss?
We have the initial figure that they gave us is about 1.3 million
Okay,
for the fleet, and we estimate to build a new one in location is going to be about 5 to 7 million to do that.
did I see a number of 9 million in here?
Those are that's originally what's in the CIP was 9 million, but we're thinking we're going to be able to do that around 5 to 7.
Okay, so you already knocked 2 to 4 million off of it. Can you do that with the rest of the projects in here?
I'll try very hard, sir.
All right, thank you.
Steve?
Yes, sir.
Mr. City Manager, as a follow-up to Councilman Dobler's question, that's a building new, and is that, what type, are we talking about a Quonset hut type of thing, or what are we looking at in the way of, what kind of building would we be constructing, or are you looking at an existing facility that you could retrofit to meet our needs?
Mayor and council, we're doing all of that. We're looking at pre-existing buildings, what it costs to retrofit. There's one that we have looked at, but for the most part, I would say we are looking at building new. And one of the things that, as we've been exploring and looking at different facilities throughout the city, current ones, a lot of those appear to be Morton buildings, and then they face the office portion of the building and the front facing of the building with a nice facade, so it looks good. And so with that concept, that would lower it. 9 would be a hard brick and mortar type building. Fleet garage, anywhere from 11 to 20 bays, depending on what. But with a Morton building and then being faced properly, we're thinking with the purchase of the property, we can be between 5 and 7.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler?
Thank you, Mayor. The current fleet maintenance shop services smaller vehicles, is that correct?
The one on the east part of the law enforcement center is for light vehicles. So eventually, if the riverfront project and all that takes place, we'll have to move our heavy equipment garage as well. But so if we build, we're looking at building it out to where we're going to be able to move both at the same time.
Okay. Have we looked at the option of outsourcing our light vehicle maintenance?
We've had that conversation, and we're going to revisit that. I think there's some things that we could contract out and maybe able to get them at a cheaper cost. So we have visited that before, but we're definitely going to revisit that again.
I think this is a perfect time to do that, and I'm certainly not in favor of a building large enough to house all of our fleet maintenance at this point in time. Thank you.
Other questions from the body? Deputy Mayor Duncan.
Maybe this is a question, maybe this is a frustration. You can take it either way. I sat here 6 months ago and I said, I'm worried about the Pulp Quincy project being more than $20 million. And I was told by multiple people in this room, you don't know what you're talking about, you're wrong, no chance, Duncan. And now I'm sitting here saying we need $7 more million for this project. I support this project, I understand the need for this project, I know we're gonna have to spend the money on this project. But I tried to bring this up 6 months ago, no, and so here we are. So there's my frustration, but here we are. And so I guess the question is, where are we on our desire, hope, dreams that there may be some other money, whether it's grant money or assistance to help us defer any of that cost?
We've applied for several grants, and we're in conversation. We just spoke with Mr. Moriarty again this evening. Our grant writer is working with KDOS grant writer and working on a grant, applying for funds to fund the whole project, not only for our part, but the entire state's project. Those applications, that one's due the end of April, and actually, most all of those applications are due the end of April, the ones that we've already applied for. So basically, we're just waiting to hear back on where we may be on some of those funds.
And I had a clarification. I think you said this. I'm just not sure if I. So the new fleet building we would build would take into account being able to take the other equipment from the river facility, right? So the new one we're going to build, if we wanted to tomorrow, we could move everything over.
If we find the right land, and then of course design is, we can design it however we want. If we just want to move light service right now, because we're not under the gun to move the heavy fleet at this time, but maybe cheaper to do them at the same time. But those will be things that we'll be looking at.
So I guess I would just say, maybe we should, if we're going to spend the money, at least look at if we moved it all over there and then we're able to no longer need that facility, there were savings there. I don't know what else goes into having that facility or if it's needed over there, but it seems like if we're going to spend the money, we might as well look at all our options if it saves us money by not having to maintain that facility anymore at all. So,
Correct. That'll be all the options. It's wide open at this point.
And then I think this was answered at one point months ago when we were doing the budget, but, so I apologize if it's a repeat question, but can someone explain to me one more time why our estimates were so far off on our disinfection modification and our North Topeka nutrient removal projects? I mean, those are huge differences, and I know Braxton's not here. So maybe that's not fair. I can hold that one for later.
He's actually online.
Yeah,
Is he?
he's on
Okay,
Zoom.
okay.
Braxton, are you online?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
So the first question was, why was the estimate so far off on the North Topeka nutrient removal? And the bottom line is that we had an estimate from a consultant who did a study many, many years ago that was left in as a placeholder and just kind of kicked along. A few months ago, when I did a presentation in front of you to ask for permission to move forward with the design contract and explain that this contract is one that is being mandated by the EPA, I explained at that time that we had had completed our study. We had current cost estimates based on current conditions, and that's what the $11 million increase was. Certainly, there was a question as to the technology and the size of that previous technology in terms of what it achieved what we needed to. So that's the short answer. It was a very old estimate, and we just moved it along as a placeholder while we were going ahead doing a new study because we knew that in conversations with the EPA that this was going to be coming, but we didn't know when. And last year is when they issued the new permit. That's when we finalized the study and our cost estimate. So again, I apologize that I had to come to you with a huge sticker shock in terms of that $11 million. Does that answer your question on that?
Yes, on that one. What about the other one? Because it's $2.5 million or so difference now, correct? On the, what is it called?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to get back with you on that in terms of the reason for that. So I do not have that answer off the top of my head. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Councilman McHale?
Just a couple on the things. On the fleet maintenance building, have we looked at any properties that could be retrofitted? Because I'm all about the, rehabbing the buildings such as Gordman's or Kmart, how they were retrofitted for other businesses. Have we exhausted all properties in Topeka that could be retrofitted for that?
I wouldn't say we've exhausted all properties. We continue to look at those properties, and we have looked at several, and so it's finding one that meets our needs as well as the expense of retrofitting those. The thing you have to keep in mind when you look at a Kmart or something like that, we have to put basins in and all that other stuff, hydraulic lifts and stuff. So the cost of retrofitting those as opposed to finding a garage that would have those things already in them, but yet a garage that is big enough. And so that's why we're exploring all of it. And
And then on to the salt brine maker. What is the life of one of those? Because as a person, I used to do salt and, or I used to do snow removal and salt and sand, and some of those machineries don't last that long just for the simple fact of they're such a harsh, aggressive metal killer.
Yes, sir. The newer versions of them are stainless steel, and so their life expectancy are in that 15-year range.
Okay. And then on the virtualization,
Yes,
is that planning to go to a straight cloud system where they just log on, or is it going to be a laptop, tablet accessible situation that they go that way?
My understanding, it would be similar to a light client. So like if you want to consider it in the old days of a dumb terminal, light client that you would basically go to the cloud to get your full Windows set up.
Okay, I've done both at jobs where one is just you have a monitor and a keyboard and that's it, and others where currently I have a laptop at the VA that's in essence my PC in essence.
Yeah, and Mark Biswell, I think I saw is online, so he could probably answer that better than I can. Mark, or did I see you online?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's the correct answer.
Light client.
Okay, I just trying to figure out because what's more cost effective and what's more user friendly also.
And I think that's some of the discussion that Mark and his team are still undergoing, which is why we're probably not looking for financing this particular year.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moe. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess as a follow-up to that, on the, since we're going to these thin clients, I noticed there's another thing in here, though, still to get new desktop PCs also like 600. So are we doing both, or?
Mark, you want to address that?
You're muted.
Councilmember Emerson, that would be a transition. We wouldn't be able to do the entire city all in 1 year, so we'd have to transition from desktops to thin clients.
Thank you for that. In that case, then, would you not spend I think in here it's asked for maybe a 4-year program of that. At some point, would you no longer spend the money on the leasing the PCs then?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Councilman Dover?
I don't want to dominate, but I guess if nobody else has one. Steve, the $10 million for this building, can you go into a little bit more depth on that? How much of that cures some of the issues that T-PAC's having right now with air conditioning?
Hannah's here. Do you want to?
yeah. Hannah, are you online?
She's
Behind you. But you could probably get online.
Yeah.
Easy. Calm down.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Councilman. I couldn't hear your question very well. Can you repeat?
Sure. The $10 million project for HVAC for City Hall and this side of City
Yep.
Hall, how much of that, what portion of that takes care of the T-PAC air conditioning problem?
Right now, we're roughly estimating between 5 and 6 million, so just about half of them. They're a shared system, so a lot of it is synergies between the two. We haven't yet had a chance to do a deep dive into the T-PAC side, so there is a little bit of unknown built into that budget. Looking forward, we do want to do additional exploratory information, looking at different options, but without having a project scope and a budget, haven't been able to do that on this particular side of the building. That does also include updates to our fire suppression system. So in addition to the HVAC, we know we are likely going to trigger a fire code review, which neither building are up to code. And that in and of itself, for the City Hall side, I can speak more accurately on a $3.5 million investment in our HVAC system. We're looking at $1 million investment in our fire suppression system just to get us up to a minimum standard.
So let me make this question simple. $10,250,000, what is that for? Does that cover this side of the building or just that
Both.
side of the building?
It covers both. So
But we
since
don't
they're-
know what this side of the building is
It is a
yet.
rough estimate based on similar systems. That does lend itself to a little bit of question marks. I've passed it by a couple of our different firms to gut check that number, and they feel that it's within an acceptable range. If it does
Okay.
exceed the 10 million, we do have some funds within our firm program that we could look to leverage for it, although we do have additional things already earmarked for that.
Okay, that answers the question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Hannah, while you're still there, and I don't even know if you have this history, but some of us have been through an initial proposal to redo City Hall and T-PAC totally for about $5 million. And somehow it expanded to about $15 million, which included all sorts of redesign of spaces and redecorating of spaces and things like that. And the council sort of balked at that because it wasn't really anything the council had voted on. It just sort of arrived. And so that got set back. Now you're talking about 10 million just for HVAC, and how does that feather in with the rest of the work that either is needed or was proposed for both the City Hall side and the TPAC side?
So I will speak to it as best I can. I was not here at that time for that original proposal, but I did have some briefings on it. So with that, this does encompass a lot of the MEP components that were associated with the HVAC and the fire suppression system that were in the initial proposal.
What is that? What were those initials?
Sorry, the initial proposal did encompass updating the entire HVAC system on the City Hall side, as well as some fairly extensive renovations to the workspaces that it was touching. The proposal was a lot of open concept floor plans, redesigning of different workspaces and new furniture schema. So a lot of it was a combination of the two. There was some additional extensive remodel that was being proposed in that initial one that included an addition to the building that would allow us to move essentially the area you're sitting in today that is dual purpose for the city council as well as municipal court into a more functional courtroom that would help that division out, because right now, while it is working, it's not the ideal setup. So that was part of that large project on the initial side, as I understand it. It also didn't touch any of the TPAC side. So that's where this has been very different. We have revisited both the plans as well as the needs from a mechanical system, which is where I spoke to, while we've done additional investigatory work on the City Hall side, it is a different system. We're going to have to completely respec it, because what we are designing it for and the setups of our office space without the addition requires a different system.
If I can reply, I must have missed the step on the addition. I recall the plans to redo this space.
Yep.
And the workspace plans that were pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But I don't recall ever having the idea of an addition come to the council.
Yep.
So for what that's worth.
And I could be misrecalling, and I apologize if I am, but
An addition?
The east entrance, yes.
Yeah.
It was not to go downstairs, it was like a whole new.
Oh, okay, to get downstairs. Gotcha. Thank you. I think it would be helpful for us to have, I don't know how you do it, but at least for me, to see the whole picture, where the HVAC fits into that, what's left, and if there's an A and a B in terms of just redoing what we have versus making changes again, just so we have some context. And if my understanding is right, thinking back to that proposal before, the idea was that to put new air handling systems and whatever all needed to be done was going to tear up so much of the structure anyway, that we should put it back better or differently. Again, I hope we can consider all that before we go very far.
Absolutely, Councilman, and we have to a degree. So without some of the additional extensive modifications to the areas, what we've been able to do is look at what do we need from a minimum perspective, and we will continue to explore, assuming this project does move forward in some capacity from this body, we'll continue to explore more finite details. The one piece I will add, just as a general overview, and please ask me clarifying questions if I get too detailed, is our existing system, speaking to the City Hall side, does not have a return air, meaning all the return air flows through occupied space, which based on current codes is a life safety concern, because in the event of a fire, it's going to blow through all the occupied space very fast. So we are going to have to run a new flue from this, essentially the roof, all the way down the building. It is an extensive modification when it comes to architecturally, engineering, putting all of those pieces in place, which triggers the fire safety code compliance review, which we do not meet current standards in the least, quite frankly. So that's where there's that additional $1 million in the budget that we've put into the City Hall part that accompanies that. So while it is HVAC, we are also recognizing that it's not an isolated system upgrade, that it will require additional reviews. And while we're getting into the ceilings, and like you said, touching a lot of the spaces, running the additional water lines to help support a true fire suppression system that meets today's standard makes more sense. It's going to be more economical versus touching it more than once.
If I can wrap up with one more question and a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
The question is, I don't recall Steve mentioning it, and I haven't studied this book super well yet, but we got this building included in the downtown historic district so that we could use tax credits.
Yes, ma'am.
For those retrofit kinds of things. Are you budgeting tax credits into your estimates right now?
We are not budgeting them directly into this project. So with the tax credits and with the variable market that comes with it, we are planning, and we have adhered to on all of the updates that we've made within City Hall or on the TPAC side, documentation so that we can submit it to SHPO so we can receive reimbursement. We have not yet gone through a full cycle of that, so it's not built into the $10 million budget that we have currently, but it can be repurposed for any number of needs across the city. So without taking the liberty of assuming it's going to go directly back into this project or into facilities, we have not included that additional revenue that we're anticipating.
And what percentage of a project can that cover, or just certain things?
It covers certain things, so it depends on how SHPO deems some of the enhancements. Anything mechanical is included, so a large percentage of the $10 million would likely be included within our potential tax reimbursement. Based on us being a non-tax entity, we get a smaller percentage of what we submit, so it is a much lower amount. I would have to get back to you on the exact percentage, but I believe it's approximately, I'm not even going to attempt this in this moment. I can get back to you on the exact amount that we would anticipate on a $10 million project.
I was seeing the number I was thinking on your tongue, I think.
I think you probably were,
Just trying to
but-
check and also make sure others realize that that was a piece of doing City Hall. The only comment I wanted to make is that I, from day one, have really strongly supported making sure we took care of TPAC, particularly HVAC-wise and structure-wise, as much as we did City Hall. So I'm pleased to see that it's being included now, and we're their landlord, if you will, and it's an important part of City Hall, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Deputy Mayor.
I have two things related to this. One of them, we'd earlier talked last year about a $3 million ventilation project. Would that still need to take place, or does this $10 million project incorporate that need? Part of that.
Ventilation project.
There was a three, right? Was there not $3 million we were told needed to be spent on ventilation for City Hall and which may be partly what you talked about. So I'm wondering if that incorporates this. So that would be off the table if we did this, or if that would still need to be
Assuming
done.
I am recalling the same project that you're referring to. Last year, we presented a number of facility assessments that we had done that included base costs of replacing like for like. And that is likely where the 3 million is coming from. So yes, it would be included as a component of this. There are additional pieces in terms of the shared chillers and some of the extra components that aren't necessarily 100% affected. This is more rooftop air handling units and some of the other elements. But I can look at last year's and get back to you with some of the more specific.
That's fine. I just wonder if we spend 10 million, is it shaving off some of that 3 million, if that makes sense?
It should, but I can confirm.
My second question, which you may not have anyone an answer for tonight, and that's okay, but I am curious. Originally, before I got here, this council approved somewhere, my number's gonna be a little off, but it was 8.5 million or so dollars that could be spent on City Hall. I believe that project cost half that. What happened to that extra foot? Was it ever borrowed, and is it sitting somewhere? Was it just not used? Was it not bonded? Or is there $4 million, or was it used on other projects? I'm just curious what happened to that money, or if it exists.
So the money was bonded, and there is 2.8, about $2.8 million that has not yet been spent.
Okay, that by the council decree still needs to be spent on this building, essentially, right?
For the municipal building, and I don't know if that means if everything's been invoiced out.
We have not invoiced everything out. We do have some of it allocated to help with some configuration of certain spaces within the City Hall area that is currently not adequate for staff. For example, there is part of that we are working on submitting to SHPO, making sure we can get approval for the historic tax credits, as well as doing final designs to help spread out certain areas and to adjust the configurations to meet the changing needs of staff. So one of the departments, for example, is Prosecution, where we have had changes in our needs, obviously, over the last decade. And we have a need to reconfigure so we have adequate office space for the attorneys that we do hire and that we house in that area. So some of those dollars have been allocated towards that project. Based on the shared use of the potential spaces that we are touching with the HVAC project, it could be an opportunity for scalability where we're able to leverage those dollars in addition to dollars dedicated to the HVAC system, to where if we're getting into a space to reallocate it to make sure it can house staff adequately, we can also touch the ceilings at that point and only touch it once. So that is the intent behind it. If we can time it, which is what we're trying to do, it can help reduce the overall cost of both.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess a question for Mr. Wade. That 2.8 million, there's a clock ticking to get that spent, right, since it was bonded?
There is a clock ticking on it, although because of COVID, we have the ability to stall a little bit.
Okay. I guess as a follow-up question, maybe to either of you, maybe to both of you. Since there's such a range of questions on this, is it possible not to okay right now like $10 million? I mean, is it possible right now to allocate, I don't know, whatever the engineering is on this? I don't have it in front of me, but what's the engineering cost? I mean, is it possible to do that and get some scenarios, then bring it back to us to approve the project?
So I will take it first, and I'll let Steve follow up from a financial standpoint. It is obviously possible that we can engineer the project, and we can do it at the approximate 10 to 15% that is standard. However, with the long lead times of a lot of our mechanical units, with where we're at, we're looking at likely a year out from the time that I get this governing body's approval from a CIP perspective to the time I could receive the mechanical units to start working on installing them. So we could do a hybrid approach to where, similar to other programs, we bring it to the infrastructure committee or to a different council for, vetting of what we are proposing and looking at that going forward. My hesitation from a true operation standpoint is, while that is very much something that Steve will, I'm sure, confirm that we are able to do, it does hamper our ability to actually place the order on the mechanical units, get those in production, knowing they're likely going to be custom products, so we could move forward as fast as we could.
Do So you already have it engineered now, is that?
We
the
don't. We
case?
have to fully engineer based on the new specs that we would have with our configurations of the building and engage with the firm on the TPAC side.
So you have to engineer it anyway, right, before you can order the material? So is
Yes, sir.
there, I realize there might be a little gap, but,
There's likely not a year gap until we get to the next CIP, where I could have
right.
an order placed. But
Can this be passed with some proviso that we may decide, we may change direction on it after that or something?
I'll defer to you, Steve.
Councilman Dover?
Maybe this helps a little bit. This falls under the ordinance or resolution, wherever it is, that has to bring this project back to the council for approval before any money can be spent. Is that correct?
It would go back to the infrastructure committee.
And then to the
for
council.
recommendation, right?
Yeah. No matter what.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And also, just because a project is in the CIP doesn't mean we bond.
Right, but it means we've given permission to go ahead and spend the money, though.
Right.
Usually, I mean, it used
But-
to,
Yeah.
yes.
No, I think there's, Mary Feeney's on the other end of the table. I'm sure there's a way we could write a proviso into it.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Councilwoman
Thank
Heller?
you.
I would just like to reiterate, somehow pulling it all together, as I think back, we've already spent a substantial amount of money on architecture and engineering. And I'm dismayed if none of that is going to be used. It sounds like the HVAC is imminent, but before we do too much, we need to straighten this thing around by the tail. I mean, we borrowed $4 million that I think was what the council said they didn't approve, so now we're spending it on remodeling anyway. Would be good to have it straight.
Councilman Dover?
Thanks. So the original project, and I think this was before my time, was $10 million or something like that, and we have 2.8 left, 1.8.
Yeah, I think at one point in time, there was a request, sir, for as much as $17 million, and that was cut back down to about 8.
Okay.
Started at about 3.
And how much of the original project was configuring space for whatever means build an office space, correct?
That was a portion of it. I can't
Okay.
speak to the exact amount. Part of what was allocated was what you've seen on the city hall side of the replacement of the stone on the
Right,
exterior.
and the security system, I understand that. Was there a specific project that outlined the components of that project for a set amount of money?
I will have to go look at what was submitted in the CIP, but it was a CIP project that was put before the committee or the council at the time. I can't recall the specifics behind it, but I do know that there was a extra layer on, as Steve had referred to, that extended that request beyond the CIP approved amount, largely related to unanticipated, from what I've heard, expenses associated with our MEMP and our HVAC upgrades.
We'll pull the specific page.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, somewhere, is there a plan for what needs to be done in this building?
There's
Do
a
we know how
shell.
much it costs? Can we figure out what the priorities are?
So
And then can we do projects that address those priorities on both sides, not just the city hall side?
there has not been a project to address the TPAC side.
Okay?
So the firm that I had the numbers and where I was able to confidently, say that we're looking at roughly $4.5 to $5 million on the city hall side is by leveraging this same team. That was part of that initial design concept because they had the original plans. They had the original schema, the designs that came with the HVAC upgrades. So they were able to very quickly retrofit some of the components to tell me what it would be for us to go forward with something similar without doing all the additional space modifications that were in the original project scope.
So it sounds like, sorry, Mayor, if I could follow up. It sounds like you're getting really good cost estimates, information on what needs to be fixed. Are we putting this into a single project, a single plan, something that we can comprehend, not these little bits and pieces that are some HVAC here and some office space there? And 1.8 million left over for something here. Can we get it all together?
That is what the 10 million is, and I can put together another recap that kind of pulls that all from some of the historical pieces as well as encompassing that. I do feel fairly confident because of the firms I'm using to help validate some of the costing, that it is a pretty good estimate of what it's going to take, knowing that the City Hall and the TPAC side of the systems are eerily similar. They serve different purposes and have different needs, obviously, based on the configurations of the building. But when it comes to how they are designed, set up, and the timing that they were installed, they have similar issues.
And I understand a lot of this happened before you took over, so I'm not upset with you.
Absolutely.
It's just, I'm an engineer, and I don't understand half of what you're saying. I mean,
Absolutely, sir.
so at some point, we've got to get a plan. We've got to understand the individual components of that plan and be able to make real decisions. And I don't feel like we can do that yet. Maybe everybody else does. Thank you.
Councilmember, we have the actual project page to answer your direct question. Upon completion of an initial facilities assessment, it was determined that extensive renovations were needed to address age and condition, functionality, capacity, code compliance, performance, and availability of parts. In addition to deficient mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, asbestos abatement will likely be necessary during replacement. To replace these systems, extensive work throughout the almost 46,000 square foot of building interiors will be required. This work is necessary to access and replace ductwork, plumbing, electrical, and other MEP systems that are within existing walls. The project scope includes renovation of building interiors for the needed MEP repair work. Work will take into account the historical nature of the building and future needs. As City Hall is located within a historic district, parts of the project could be eligible to receive state historic tax credits upon completion. Firm was selected in late 2017 for work with a project planned for completion within 3 to 5 years.
So the original project was approved based on that paragraph,
Yes, sir.
which could be anywhere between 2 million and 120 million.
Yes, sir.
And I understand we're not doing that anymore. We're not approving projects in the CIP and then basically it never comes back in front of the council again, although I know this did after there was some concerns raised. It still doesn't feel like we've got to that step. At some point you hire the architects, you figure out what it's going to cost. You don't have a may use tax credits. You have either you can use it or you can't. And you put that all together in a project and we approve it. I don't feel like we're there yet. Probably not anybody in this room's fault, I know, but we've got to get there. It's a lot of money we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
And a critical building. Sorry to dominate. Thank you.
Sorry, if I may, I feel some of the frustration that Councilman Dober is talking about. For me, it almost reminds me of when we were, a while back, maybe a year or so ago, and we're saying, let's find all these projects that are still out there unfinished and clean them up and move forward with them. When you talk, what is it, 2.8 million that's sitting there? Can that be used for a specific piece of the project overall that we can move on now, or are you holding that in reserves to see if it can be leveraged with the rest? My frustration is like, what I'm hearing is, we know what we want to do, but we haven't yet done it. And for me, I would like to know, with that remainder 2.8, what's the specific plan to use it and how soon? And if you can't bring it to us in a whole package, at least give us some idea on what we can act on now.
We can pull all that together for you, sir.
Quick question.
Councilwoman Hiller.
What is the name of this project in our book?
It's in the 2019 book, 2018 book.
Okay. No wonder I couldn't find it. Thank you.
I hope you don't take my comments as being attacking in any way or shape
no,
or
sir.
form. It's just, that I don't want to go down that same road that we did before, that, okay, how much money is sitting out there? How many projects do we have? I don't want to say languishing, but have not been revisited, so we can close them out and move forward and maybe give us a better idea of where we stand. So that's where I kind of think where Councilman Dobler's alluding to is that, for me, I just want to see us be able to make an accounting of where we are and what we have left and what the plans are specifically, and be a little more on target as much as we can.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I totally agree. When I say we'll get it to you, I don't have a solid answer for you tonight. And so I would rather do a little bit of research and get you that to button it up.
Understood. This is our first meeting, so this gives us a chance to discuss it and get a feel for what we're asking for. So thank you, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions? Deputy Mayor?
Well, I guess a clarification, and only because it was in this evening's presentation. Is there any, there's one of these was South Kansas Avenue, 4th to 6th Street, which is a $10 million project. I believe there have been some talks about maybe that no longer being part of the CIP at this time, but I'd like to either get confirmation or, since it was part of the presentation. I know things move fast, so that's why I was.
Yeah, the presentation was built a couple days ago. Those one-way projects have been pulled, 4th and 5th Street as well as Jackson and Harrison.
Thank you.
Okay. No further questions, Mr. Wade?
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could, one item that I would like to share with the council. If you look at the parking fund requests, you'll see about $7 million for parking renovations. It is, I think, Finance's opinion that what would be best would be to switch that, instead of parking fund, to taxable Geo Bonds. And then that way, if the council does decide to make a move with our parking garages down the road, that we have the flexibility to make that move. So that's a change from the current book.
What page is that on, Steve?
121.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Wade, I understand there's actually a project, you took, the city recently took proposals, right, to take over our parking garages?
We put together a request for qualifications,
Okay,
which basically looking at operations that might be qualified to operate one of the parking structures.
so would that be, we would still have to repair them, or is that something if we go another route, select someone to do it, would they be doing that as part of their,
To be determined.
okay?
So that has not yet been determined.
And we have a meeting coming up next week to discuss those proposals that we received. Staff does, and then we'll do a presentation to the governing body.
Okay, thank you. I guess just as a follow-up, since this is a little different of a project, then would this also come before us for approval before?
Yes,
there's
sir.
ever like a contract signed? Okay.
Yes, sir, it would.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
No questions? Stephen?
Those were what we had prepared for this evening.
Okay.
We can,
I believe, yeah, we have time. We think we'd like to roll into police and fire.
As long as we have time.
I'm assuming we want to meet as long as we get as much stuff we can knocked out tonight, so
Yep.
we don't have to spend as many sessions during the week.
Question.
Councilwoman Taylor?
Is infrastructure over, or is it coming, it's scheduled for 8 to 9, so?
we've gone through both the neighborhoods and the infrastructure. So these are basically those pages 14 through 95.
Well, I did have a question on something they didn't put in the,
Okay, go ahead.
the text on a number of the street project funds, and I will confess, I really haven't done my full deep dive, so I know I saw it maybe on Fix Our Streets funds, show a substantial amount of unspent funds for prior years in the notes, and I really appreciate that the notes were that thorough. But it worries me that this keeps happening, and it seems that we just kind of can't keep up with whatever we've said we were going to do, or we can never if we're spending our time catching up, then we don't get this year's money even budgeted, much less done. So was there any conversation amongst finance or other staff about kind of clearing the decks on some of that prior money and just closing them out and starting fresh with a determination to keep on track? I think you know what I'm saying. If I need to explain it more,
Yeah, so if you can look at page 23 in your book.
it's a good example. That's one of the ones I had caught and marked.
So what we're doing is we are having conversations between Public Works and Finance, looking specifically at monies that have not been spent. What is coming up, there are some projects that have been closed, there are some projects that are being closed. Any unused money then goes back to debt service. But we are being, I guess, very diligent in trying to take advantage of those opportunities.
Well, I caught that and I wanted to encourage it because one of the reasons I requested that when these came through, I requested it last year, was that at least whatever specific projects were on deck for the first year of the new CIP be identified. And they are in some cases, but they're not in others. And just because I represent Central Topeka and people have asked about projects, I know that current year buckets for some of the Fix Our Streets things, they don't have projects identified yet. And bond projects as well. And that can happen, I get that. But it just seems like we need to take time out and like skip a year on something or reprogram to the extent that we can dollars so that it helps clear this financial backlog. If we're never going to get caught up, I'd like to see us, and that's not just you, that would be the departments, of course, get this reconciled.
So I slightly misspoke.
Okay.
When I say unused monies returned back to debt service, that's specifically for Geo Bonds.
Right, and this is...
This particular project is a Fix Our Streets half-cent project, which means anything not spent on that goes back to half-cent.
Right.
Based on where we have our conversations with engineering at this point in time, is the amount that we have in half-cent sales tax has all been spoken for with planned projects. And so without additional authorization on the half-cent sales tax, these additional projects could not move forward.
Without us getting information about what's planned, that's been hard, and it's been a moving target as well. The other thing I wanted to mention, and again, it's not finance's issue, but the text here, which somebody must have advised finance, is that, for instance, on this one on page 23, the alley repair program is used to rehabilitate alleys citywide that have been requested by constituents and approved through engineering. That was not at all the way the Fix Our Streets project was set up. And in fact, I had to, maybe after this was typed, had to advise the interim staff, lead staff at Public Works not long ago that there was a roster of the alleys and they were rated and grouped by, it's a rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the idea was we were going to very intentionally inventory what we had and then work our way through well, right now, for instance, we're doing both ends against the middle on our streets, trying to get the ones that are fixed maintained while we continue to kind of bring up the rear and get the ones that need to be reconstructed done. But one of the reasons to do that was to not be managing our city by complaint, but instead by an intentional inventory and plan. So wherever that comment should fall, I was just concerned, there are a number of pages that have phrasing similar to this. This particular one shows 695,000 of spending authority remaining and 337 and some change remaining unallocated, that kind of thing. Thank you.
Councilman Dobler?
Steve, how much is in the half-cent sales tax fund right now, roughly?
Approximately $20 million.
We have $20 million worth of projects on the books right now, ready to go?
Based on what has been previously approved by the council, I'm not going to say they're ready to go, but they're on the books and slated to go.
This year?
No, sir.
And we've got another 14 million coming in this year, or more, probably. Right?
Yes, sir.
So we're behind, essentially.
Yes, sir.
Year and a half, maybe. It's a good thing. We just, as Councilwoman Hiller indicated, we need to get caught up.
Well, and if there's some reallocation amongst priorities based on what's most important, it would give us the opportunity to do it as well. I'm not saying we need to, just seems like we're dipping into the pot.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. I see the note, and I'm sorry, it's kind of small print. I should have brought my glasses, but it says the city is looking to transition from full-length alley replacement to a limited alley reconstruction approach. So when I read that, is the barrier right now to spending this money that we can't do it until we are going to do an entire alley? Right now, they're not allowed to do a portion of an alley. Is that, maybe that's a Mr. Bidwell question, but.
Yeah, Robert's coming up.
So the alley work that we have planned for this year, we are preparing a resolution to be presented to the Infrastructure Committee. That said, we have implemented, or we have, as you alluded to, the alley rating program. That was basically developed over the last year. And as we are looking to implement that, the alley work we have scheduled for this year is a combination of 2 complete alleys that we are looking at full reconstruction, as well as several alleys. We're just looking at spot repairs. For instance, one alley, in the past, I don't know if it was part of some utility work, but like 2/3 of the alley was reconstructed, and they left the remaining portion, so we're looking at completing that.
Councilman Dobler?
While you're up here, Mr. Bidwell, I know you guys are woefully understaffed right now. Is that part of the issue with getting these projects out the door? Spending the money, you just don't really have the staff to manage them right at this point in time?
I would say that's part of it.
Okay. I think that's something we need to look at as we get into our regular budget session.
Now, we are implementing, reaching out to consultants to utilize as project managers to help us with the backlog of getting projects out for construction.
Good. So you've got some plans to
Yes.
start spending this money down. Very good. Thank you.
Councilman Emerson?
Yeah, Mr. Bidwell, and on this, are these all paved alleys? Is that what this program does, or does this include gravel alleys?
Now, well, as far as maintaining gravel alleys is done in the street department. So within the alley program in the half-cent sales tax, it is for paving. Either alleys that are already paved and we're reconstructing, or potentially reconstructing a gravel alley to concrete.
Okay. Okay. And I guess then, maybe to follow up a little bit on what Councilman Dobler asked, what is the major holdup then? Like, in other words, the money that's unspent, why was it not able to be spent in previous years?
In the alleys in
Yes,
particular?
yeah.
So, the alleys in 21, for instance, we had 3 alleys identified, all in North Topeka. One of them is, we have to wait till the North Kansas project is complete, because it's just a half block over and it's in conflict.
Okay.
So there's that reason. And then the other 2 are in the Noto area, and we had plans complete just a little bit too late last year to get started. We didn't want to chance having the alley not complete before a winter shutdown. So that is, those alleys are currently going out for bid as we speak.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Kell?
Now, some of the delays on some of these projects that we award too many contracts to one company, and it's taken them a little bit longer to get some of these, getting some of these projects done, because it seems like just on a curb restructure project, it would seem like it was all done throughout town recently, and it was torn up, and it was like a month later before it was even filled in with asphalt. At least on my street, it just finally got filled in with asphalt today. And they ripped up the old asphalt and the curb easily a month ago. And so I'm just wondering if we're just awarding too many contracts to one company or to a certain group of companies, and it's taking too long for these projects to get completed overall.
Well, as far as curb and gutter project, a lot of those are spots that are addressed due to service requests or C-click fixes. They can be spread over town, but as far as the asphalt, typically asphalt plants aren't open during the winter, so there may have been some curb and gutter that got replaced over the winter, that maybe they had some temporary surfacing in there.
There's none. They ground it down, and you got that much of a gap between the curb and what they ground down to the existing asphalt. Like I said, it was there for a month, and I had several people throughout town bring it up to me, and like I said, I dealt with it myself on my street. So sometimes I wonder, throughout the years, I've looked at some of these projects, and it seems like they want to do part A, and then go to another place, do part A, then another place, and they want to go all over town doing certain parts rather than just kind of working one area, getting it done, moving on to the next one. And then they might get overloaded, and with weather and things that play factors into it, get delayed, and then all these projects are getting delayed because they're kind of spreading themselves too thin on their projects that they're winning contracts on. So that might be something to look at also, because I felt it was way too long of a deal for a month to have asphalt put back in after they've ground it down, and people are possibly having their tires blown out because of this, for a project that started over a month ago.
Well, we can definitely focus on trying to, make these projects geographically more confined in smaller areas, so that we can look at the deadlines for the work as well, to make sure the work's done in a timely manner.
Deputy Mayor?
All right, I have an ADA sidewalk ramp question. I know that's in here, and we need that program, so I'm glad to see that it's in here. I'm going to try to make this make sense. So there's a few projects over the last couple of years in my district where we fixed the curb and gutter, and we did a great job on the ramp. But the other side of the street has no ramp, because that wasn't part of the project, it's older, so they fixed it and it looks great, but if you're in your wheelchair and you're trying to go across, we didn't actually give them the on-way to get back up. So I guess two questions, I guess, to part of that. Is that when we go around and talk about improving ramp areas, are those areas we will look at, like, hey, existing ones, do they have an actual connection? And two, can we at least consider, because I understand completely why it can get overlooked, because you're focused on that part of the project, but make sure moving forward that we build that in. Hey, look across the street and see if we also need to factor into the cost of this, the connector. And I'm not saying it's happened on every, but there's about 2 or 3 where, it's just sort of naturally happened the last couple of years. So it's a great program. I just will throw that out there for consideration on those ADA ramps.
I will say that we do, wherever possible, look at both sides of the ramp. There may be areas where, just due to the terrain, if there's, if it's too steep or too involved, we may not get to this time around. Also, there's been instances where maybe utility work may have happened on a corner where they had to replace a sidewalk ramp, but since the utility work wasn't on the other side, they didn't address that.
And I think that's where it's happened. So it's probably just coordination between Public Works and utilities or whoever to say, hey, look across the street.
All right.
Thank you.
City Manager?
Councilman Duncan, to your point, one of the things that we did a review several months back when we had one of these incidences, and the policy going forward is we're going to make ADA accessible, basically intersection around. We have to get there anyway, and so those are steps that we're going to be taking. One of the other things that I understand on these projects and getting them out the door, we've had some issues with staffing and some different issues over the last year, and we are implementing a plan, getting it in place, and how we're going to start getting these projects out the door in a much quicker fashion and a more efficient manner. And so I know it's not maybe assuring to hear that right now that unfortunately we got a plan, we're going to stay the course, we're going to get it going. We may incur a little more surplus before we get to that point, but trust me, when we get to that point, we will make this stuff happen.
Councilman Kell?
To the city manager, on that staffing issue, can we actually look at getting where we're missing everyone throughout the city, so we can look at where we might need to focus on getting people into those positions so we can get these things rolling? Because you look at a flow chart and, as the 10 of us set up here, flow chart doesn't really tell us sometimes how their importance they are on certain projects. So we can look at that and maybe see where we definitely need to hit positions in the recruitment area, and also maybe looking at wages and things like that to try to attract people so we can get these projects rolling a little bit smoother and year to year.
Yes, sir. We're putting together a comprehensive plan in which we're doing that. The unfortunate thing, it's going to be about another 4 months before we get some of it in place. But for engineering staffing, for example, we got student interns that'll be coming in over the summer. We got 2 of those lined up. We're in conversation with other universities as well as Washburn Tech, and we're looking at some contract traffic engineering. So when we talk about public works and that aspect of it, in about 4 months, I hope to come back and say, hey, we're rocking and rolling and knocking it out of the park. But we are looking at a comprehensive plan for employment issues across the board, top to bottom, in all departments. And you mentioned salaries. We're in a compensation study that's going to be completed at the end of this week, and so we'll be bringing that forward to the governing body to take a look at that as well.
Councilman Dover?
Yeah, in all fairness, I mean, the entire industry is in turmoil, like everything else in the world right now. Private companies can't hire engineers. It's tough for government to hire engineers. Contractors are busy. Prices are going up every day. It's a mess everywhere. So it's tough to sit here and look at the pot of $20 million, and as I drove over 6 potholes on the way to this meeting, and why can't we fix things right now? It's tough to do, and I think we understand that, and I appreciate the fact that you're looking at options to increase staffing in maybe non-traditional ways, because that's what it's going to take. So keep doing what you're doing. Thanks.
Councilwoman Hiller?
Just to follow up and maybe wrap up on my comments on this ADA one as well, says that there's over 300,000 unallocated for it, not just obligated but unspent but unallocated. And I think between them, there is more like $1 million that's unallocated in just the language that's here. For ADA, when we got the first half-cent sales tax, the staff's estimate at that point, and I think they had a list, was that it would take us 8 years at whatever it was then, 500,000 a year. That we were under a federal mandate to get all of our crosswalks accessible. And they thought that we could get done in 8 years. By the time we got to 10, what had happened is they'd done this, I'm going to paraphrase what they said, did all the easy ones and left the really hard ones that were ramped and needed retaining walls and things like that for the end. But now we're 4 years after that, and if I understand correctly, we're starting to redo some where the recommended red bumpy things that were bolted in are falling apart. I mean, is there a list someplace of the master list of how much we got done and how many we have left, and then of course the start on the redos?
Councilwoman, if I may?
Yes.
Yes, we're putting that together, and when we talk about some of those unallocated funds, this is to improve those intersections where we only touch 1 or 2 of the corners, touching all 4 of the corners. And so we'll get you those numbers, we'll get you what was done, what'll be the plan, and again, some of those unallocated funds will be exactly for the corner, the one that you contact us. We did 2, but we didn't do the other 2, but you had to go across the street.
Right.
You know, so that, yeah, we're focused on that. We are still under the federal mandate, but we are going to get there.
Well, and I really appreciate your stepping in and your service. We walked a couple recently as well, just with a small crew, and to take the time to be able to do that. And I know it's hard, so I'm hoping to direct even toward lists that maybe got set aside that can be retrieved even.
We'll get there, so.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Further questions? Steve?
Mr. Mayor, we're running ahead of schedule. We had a break planned at 7:45. I wonder if this might be a good time to take that and then come back with public safety?
Sounds like a good idea. Let's recess for 15 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we're back live, back from our breakout session. And Mr. Wade, if you'll continue from the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you will turn in your books to the last line on page 3, we will start to cover public safety. So we've been through neighborhoods, we've been through infrastructure. We'd like to move to public safety next. And so we'll be talking about pages 3 and 4 in your books. On page 3, you see Shunga Creek flood mitigation. That's a carryover from years past. You'll see some stormwater flow monitoring, a fire department fleet replacement. Chief Phillips, I think you're on. Chief, are you still on?
Yes, I'm here.
So for 23 and 24, we have $1.8 million for fleet replacement and $1.7 million in 24. Do I recall correctly that we have a ladder truck in one of those years?
Yes, sir. The current plan, fleet replacement plan that we have within the department, the money that's in the CIP for fleet replacement for next year, 23, would be the replacement of the platform aerial apparatus at Station 5. And then in '24, it would be for the replacement. I believe it would be a engine company and a rescue body style truck company.
And then Chief, I think new to this year is the self-contained breathing apparatus. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yes, so our SCBA, those are our air pack that, sorry, I apologize, I wasn't thinking to have my video on. I believe it's approximately every 10 to 12 years. I believe in talking with my staff. We are currently on a plan where we are making, the last SCBA's we purchased were for a 5-year lease plan. Those payments are about to be done. Then those monies are allocated for the purchase of the new portable radios and base radios that we will need the following year. So I believe that's the schedule of the plan that we're on. And we're just getting to that point where in 5-6 years, we'll be getting to where we need to purchase the new SCBAs. And that's why they're coming up in the CIP now.
Any questions for the fire chief on those?
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor?
So this is I guess I have 2 questions because you included one, so I'll ask it. Well, actually, one's a very small question. So we buy them after 10 years, we put them in reserve for 5 years. So when it's 15 years old, what do we do with a 15-year-old truck?
Yeah.
We sell it, we part it out. What happens to that truck? Do we get any revenue from whatever we do with it? Just curious.
Normally, yes, they are surplused out. I will tell you that the plan is that they're a frontline apparatus for 10 years and then a reserve for 5. We do absolutely have occasions where we have apparatus that are in frontline status for more than 10 years. And even once they go into reserve status, that we've kept them for more than 15, just due to sheer numbers and cost. But once they are taken out of service for us as a department, most often, yes, they are surplused out. Now, we did just have one that we donated to Washburn Tech for, I believe it was for their diesel mechanic program is what they're going to use it for. We had a situation where the pump was froze up and damaged beyond repair about a year ago. And so there wasn't really a way to surplus it out. So there was conversations with fire department staff and Washburn Tech, and that's what was done.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, I know it's obviously not worth nearly what a new truck costs, but it's nice to know if we can do something with it. Or my other question was, and I'm not sure if this is directly for you or staff, but what radios did we just buy? Because did we not put aside funds at the end of the year, or maybe it was before that because some of it's starting to run together, where both police and fire needed new radios, and we bought some radios, and obviously that was different radios than what's in this CIP. It was my understanding we specifically took, I can't remember if it was the $3 million at the end of the year or something right before that, whether it was CARES money or it was, it's like I said, but.
Deputy Mayor, honestly, I'm drawing a little bit of a blank. If I could get back to you on that.
Okay, that's fine. But I do remember that being a line on one of those. So yeah, if you could just let me know if these were just a different type of radio or if we forgot we bought them.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All I can answer to that, sir, is that I'm not aware of any new radios that we have purchased anytime recently.
Councilman Gill?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is maybe with me being new and only been on the job for about 3 months now. I don't see any maintenance to the firehouses, which we have some firehouses and they're in very disrepair. And just wondering why we don't have anything like that on the budget. When we have firehouses with leaky roofs and mold and other things like that.
Sir, actually, all buildings are covered under the firm, the Facilities Improvement and Replacement Maintenance Program. And so the firehouses are part of that. We also have, a year ago, set aside about $4 million for firehouse repair. So, and that's ongoing right now.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Proceed.
So we also have the police chief online if there happen to be any questions. You'll notice that we have fleet replacement, body cams, and mobile data terminals. Those are normal every year expenses. And then you'll see several items related to water, and Braxton is online if you have questions in regards to the zone optimizations that are listed in the CIP here.
Councilman Gale.
This is kind of more of on the backside for the Chief Wheelers. On the surplus and the vehicles, when we get rid of those, I've had a problem for several years where when these cars go out into the regular population to drive around, that they still look like a police car. And people have used them to pull other people over and things like that. Is there any way we can strip down these vehicles to get, like the front bumper guard, front dome light off the side, and not make these look like police cars? Or if we're not selling them to another police department, or for a historical reason, like if it's going to a museum or something like that, where we can just get these things stripped down to looking just like what a general public could buy from a dealership of that model?
I think it's important to note, I mean, we do take the markings off when we sell them. As far as spotlights and those kind of things, you can get those on a car when you order it through the dealership. So we take off the gear that we can take off as far as that marks it as a Topeka Police Department vehicle. But some of the standard issued equipment on it is kind of what it is. It's something we could look at, but not something that we've done as a normal practice.
Okay, thank you.
Speaking to Mr. Kell's concern, Chief, are you aware of any reported incidents where someone has in fact used a surplus police vehicle to impersonate a police officer or make a stop in the city?
No, I'm not aware here locally that happening with any of our vehicles in this city. Nationally, there are instances where police or citizens impersonate police, but those are not necessarily predicated on buying a car from a police department. You can outfit a car from a dealership equipment through regular companies. Lights and sirens and spotlights are all available commercially purchased for regular citizens.
Mayor, we no longer sell used police cars to the general public. We haven't done that for several years.
Thank you, City Manager. Any further questions here on fire or police? Change your mind. Okay. Okay. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you explain to me the chemical building rehabilitation?
Braxton?
Sorry, trying to get the mute button off. Chemical building rehabilitation is the rehabilitation of the chlorine feed building that we have at the water treatment plant. Rehabilitation of that highly critical building, which is basically the apparatus that takes the chlorine out of the tanker cars and puts it into a form that we can put into the chlorine contact basin, is a absolutely critical component of our water treatment facility. It also has major life safety issues with it. That is one of the projects that was recommended out of the 2018 water treatment plant condition assessment that was done by Black and Beach.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Braxton, we took a tour out there. Was that the building that was set aside from the treatment plant?
Yes, ma'am. For safety purposes, the evaporator is a separate building. That's the little tiny building that sits immediately adjacent to the flood wall and right beside the chlorine tanker cars.
Does this cover that? Because I remember at that time when we took a tour, it was very critical that that be replaced then.
Yes, ma'am. It's the rehabilitation of that. It's currently operating fine, but obviously chlorine is an extremely corrosive chemical. And so we have to plan for the replacement of of that equipment so that it doesn't pose a hazard to the public or to our employees.
Because if it was my understanding that if that shuts down the whole Topeka water.
Yes, ma'am.
So when will this be done? Because I thought it needed to be done then.
The equipment is currently working fine. I'm trying to find the budget page. Steve, can you give me the page number in the hard copy book because the index isn't correctly listed?
Okay, let's see.
41.
Is it 61 with the pages?
Braxton, it's page 41.
Thank you, Steve. It is planned for 2024. Sylvia.
To my colleagues, this is scary because I thought that was fixed. And I don't know what we need to do, but that's critical. And I've always had that same nightmare that if that goes down, the city of Topeka will not have any drinking water.
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, the facility is currently operating. We're able to maintain it. This is for doing substantial rehabilitation of the facility to continue to ensure the continued long-term operation of it.
I get that, Braxton, but how long are we going to be able to maintain it? And I know you have no idea. That's what worries me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Braxton.
Further questions from the body? Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions for Mr. Copley. One of the things is on page 110, it's the stormwater and wastewater flow monitoring. And it looks like it's like $200,000 a year, well, maybe out to infinity, but it says we lease these. Do you know how many of these there are?
No, sir, I will get that information provided to you. The monitoring is part of our long-term control plan under the consent decree that we're under with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment relative to our combined sewer system. So the quote-unquote flow monitors are our combined sewer system to be able to track that, to be able to provide that, to update our model that is based on the amount of flow. I can tell you that the standard that the EPA has adopted is to be able to capture on an annual average basis at least 85% of your wet weather flow. Based on the last run of the model, we are actually achieving somewhere in the 92 to 93% of our wet weather flow.
Okay.
So I will get the details for you on the number of flow meters, but I want you to understand the overarching purpose is not just to burn money, it is to validate the model that we need as part of the compliance with our long-term control plan relative to our CSOs.
Sure, and I guess my question was more of, for $200,000 a year, you know, I'm pretty familiar with flow monitors and installed quite a few of them, and that can buy a lot of flow monitors. I just wonder if we could have buy these for a couple of years' worth of this lease payment. So that was kind of my question. 200,000 just seems like a lot unless we have 1,000 of these things, which I know we don't.
The ones where we've purchased in the past, and we've had them, have become a maintenance nightmare in this particular situation. And so this is turnkey in terms of leasing them, you install it, you maintain it, and we're assured that we're getting good data out of it. So that's why we had made that move to the leasing as opposed to the purchase, and not have staff that were qualified to be able to go in and maintain these sensitive and very delicate and complex devices.
Okay, yeah, if you can give me that number, that'd be fantastic. And the other question is, as you know, we've gotten some questions about how much water main we're replacing, and it looks like there's a huge increase in 2023. And I have several in my district, and I know probably everyone does. At some point, would you guys have in the 20 hours a week that your utilities, that's a joke, but have you guys have some sort of list? I mean, it seems like this is a very specific number, so would it be possible to give us a list of what you're looking at doing with this in 2023?
Steve,
Okay.
Braxton's actually ahead of you on that one. And
Fantastic.
has provided that list. We can email that out to you.
That would be fantastic.
I think we've got 4 copies, hard copies now, but we can email them out.
As long as Gemini's on there, I'm great. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Copley.
Further questions?
Got one online
I
for me.
I see it. Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. Braxton? Don't go anywhere, Braxton. Hello, Braxton?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here waiting your question.
Okay. Replacement of mediums 2023. How many mediums does that replace?
The median replacement program, you'll see that there's a single lump sum, I want to say 680,000. Then you'll see that has also been basically put frozen until something like 2028. So the plan is to address the backlog of medians that we have. So we can get you that information in terms of the approximate number to be addressed in this. But again, I want to point out that the critical thing is this is not an amount that's ongoing every year. We're basically saying we have a glut of these medians that we need to go in and do. We're developing plans to go in and do that. And then funding has been suspended until out years. I want to say 2027, 2028 off the top of my head.
Okay, and then also, I would like to do a ride-along with you, because at 6 and Branner, they took some of my mediums out, they didn't put them in on the north and then on the north and the west side, and I don't understand that. So I want to get a more clear understanding on what we're doing with mediums, because I was also told, like in California, we didn't need it at 25th in California. So I'm not quite sure how some areas we need them and how some we don't. So that'll be another discussion between me and you. One more thing, Firm 2023, what is that?
Firm 2023, council member would be building and facilities maintenance and repair.
Okay, thank you. I like the hair, Mr. Wade.
It's probably a mess, thank you.
Other questions from the body for Mr. Wade? Councilwoman Hiller.
2, one small one that goes back to the beginning, the salt brine maker. How often does such a piece of equipment get used?
This year, I think it would have already been used 4 times.
Okay, I mean, 4 times, like 4 hours or 400 hours, or how does that work?
Depends on the snow.
Yeah.
Tony Trower can better answer that.
So right now, we purchase our salt brine that we're using. Moving forward with our program, we want to enhance more of using liquids. And so using that, right now we have 4 storage tanks that hold 15,000 gallons. So we'd be using that quite a bit. I mean, that's what we would use, make our salt brine in our yard, transfer it to South Fork, and use out of our yard at 201. We do not have we do have a price on that, but we're going to a snow conference. We're going to get some more figures on it. Right now, we're paying, let me look here. We pay 91 cents a gallon for that. If we was to be able to make that, had this machine and making it in-house, it would only cost us 35 cents. So just the savings of that. We've used the salt brine this year. We did more anti-icing on arterials. We used to just do it on the bridges for frost. 3 of the snows that we had this year on Wanamaker, Fairlawn, and Gage, after we anti-iced that, we didn't have to go back. They went and plowed it one time, and we did not have to put any more salt down or anything through that snow. So it's just putting a lot less salt on the road. So we normally put down 200 pounds per lane mile of salt. This would be, we'd only be putting 150 pounds, or it would save 150 pounds of salt being put on that street by using the liquid. So, but we would use it through the whole winter time. We'd be constantly making salt brine.
Okay, and it's unfamiliar to me. We've had discussions before about pieces of equipment that people said, well, why do we need to own our own? Why don't we share it with somebody else who else has one? You know, I don't know if you can make the salt brine up ahead or whether anybody who's using it needs it all at the same time.
Yeah, and so all of our equipment we're moving forward with will have this salt brine be using. So yes, we would make it ahead of time. So we'd have 4 tanks that we have currently would be filled constantly. So every storm that we were using that, we would remake it and replenish those tanks for the next storm.
Okay, so with that, and maybe I can ask further, I guess the issue is if we only needed the county to have one and we all used the county's or they all used ours or whatever, just didn't know if we needed those extra pieces.
And we can check into that. I know KDOT, they use that a lot. I mean, that's pretty much all they went to is straight liquid. And that's why we wanted to do it. This was our first year of enhancing our program, and I think it helped out a lot. But I can definitely check with them to see, you know, what's the chances of partnering with them. I don't know about Shawnee County, if they use it or not. I'm not 100% sure, but I was sure check.
Was only not sure whether it could be made up in advance, and if you're doing it in advance of an event and using what's already been made, then that trade-off of sharing some equipment might be available.
Yeah, and we can make it right now and keep it all summer long. All we do is circulate that. You have to, every month, you just recirculate it in a tank to keep it from breaking down, mixing it up.
Okay.
So that's what we do constantly now.
Well, might be something to look into. The other question that I had, which is not for you, is more of the council. I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Well, to go to the point he was making about the main roads that they did, I saw a big difference this year in that, and without knowing that, and then I was able to see that they were able to get to the side roads a lot better.
Oh, absolutely.
Or not even touched, you know, where in years past, some of the side roads weren't even touched because they were so worried about the main roads that I was able to see from myself driving around town, those roads that you mentioned, that there was a big difference. And then I'd come home and I'm like, my street never gets plowed, and all of a sudden it was plowed. And so I think by going like his system he's talking about, it's going to benefit us in the long run, not just on our main streets, but you know, it'll give us access to our side streets getting taken care of also. Because I live at the bottom of my intersection's a hill, and every year someone goes through that intersection because they can't get it plowed in time. And so it's nice to see that progression that they're making with a system like this.
And that's exactly what happened. So the last 2 snowstorms we had, Wanamaker and Fairlawn and Gage, they were, you know, once we plowed them once after the snow started sticking, we just had to go back every couple hours so we could move those resources to another part of the town and to get it cleaned up quicker. So
Tony, maybe this is the same question that Councilwoman Hiller asked, just in a different way. Do you know what the county process is, or do they use the same salt primarily, or do they use?
I know that Shawnee County uses a lot of salt sand mix. For instance, like Croco, where I live right off of Croco, they're constantly out there sweeping it. So I do know they use a lot of salt sand mix instead of straight salt like what we use. So, but I'm not 100% sure what all they use as far as liquids or anything.
So would you know that if they had the capacity to use that brine, would they be able to do that? Do they have the equipment to use it?
The county? I just have to check with them. I don't know if they have saddle tanks in their trucks or slide-in tanks, because we have two, one 1,800 gallon and a 1,500 gallon slide-in tank that we anti-ice with prior to the storm. And then we have our 4 new dump trucks that we got 2 years ago that have 800 gallon tanks on them. So we're pre-wetting as well, and we can use those to anti-ice the streets with a spray bar that we had designed to put on the back of it. So.
Thank you, Tony.
Mr.
Councilwoman Hannah Nager. There you are.
Thank you. On that same note, we're talking a lot about how much we can save on this particular solution, but I'm curious in knowing, do we know how much we saved on work hours? Did people work the same amount of hours and just cover more mileage, or did people work less hours because we did this instead? Could you give us a breakdown of that? Because that's definitely savings to the city as well.
I could get you some exact numbers. We'd have to do some figuring, but I know, a snowstorm this year that we had for 5 inches, say we were, in less than 2 days, we were done. And in the past, prior to using the liquids and the newer equipment that we have, we would be there 4 or 5 days in that storm. And so I think we've made a big improvement in our program with the liquids that we're using and the equipment. As far as the wing plows, I know some of you have seen those. We got a lot of slack from our employees with those when we first got them, and now everybody on the department wants one. So, you're just taking away 2 trucks on a road, and that one's doing the job of 2. So again, that's where your question was, we can move around and move our resources to get things cleaned up quicker, so.
Excellent. And I do have a follow-up to that, and this might not be a question for you, it might be a question more for people who are doing the maintenance of the streets, but do we have enough information at this point to know the difference of the cost of street maintenance following this treatment rather than more harmful treatments that we've used in the past?
It's just better on the roads than.
Yeah, this is, I do not have no numbers on that, but the salt using the liquid, we're only putting down 25 gallons of that salt mix at 50 pounds instead of 200. So we're doing a hell of a difference with the environment and the wear and tear on our streets, so.
Excellent. So that's good for street maintenance and for utilities as far as stormwater. So it sounds excellent to me. Thank you very much for that information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Emerson.
Just, Mr. Trower, just echo what everybody said. This year is the best year that I can remember in recent memory of getting the streets cleared. So if that's what you're doing, keep it up. But I have another suggestion. Don't partner with the county. Let's sell this to them for 91 cents a gallon.
That's where I was going. If we can be the provider. That's right.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm very pleased with my crew and all the crews that help us with that, so thank you.
Councilman Dover.
Thanks, Mayor. Like everybody else, Tony, good year. I know Public Works is suffering through a lot of staffing issues right now. I want to commend you and Braxton for continuing the leadership, I think, of Public Works without missing a beat, really. I know just things like preparing the CIP takes a lot of time. Braxton's doing it for utilities and Public Works, and I know you're carrying your share as far as street goes. So that good work doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you, Tony.
Yep.
Mr. Wade.
Mr. Mayor, if there are no more questions on public safety, we can move to quality of life.
Let's move.
So quality of life, we've already covered several of these in the initial PowerPoint. We talked briefly about the nutrient removal. We've talked briefly about the parking facilities, the disinfection modification, and I believe that Braxton has sent a note to the council noting that the $10 million that's in fiscal year '23 is in essence the remainder of the expenses on it, so it's not new money. We have Bikeways master plan for '23. This is something that we normally have on a regular basis, but Mr. Fyander, Director Fyander, is available if there's any questions on that specific item. He's online.
Oh, is it?
And then we have a follow-up on the electric vehicle charging stations and our Open Cities platform, which is an annual expense.
Councilman Emerson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Wade, did you say you had a follow-up on, and I'm sorry, I have not looked at the actual project page yet on the electric charging stations?
It was in last year's CIP, and so this is just a continuation of the CIP, I believe.
Okay. Is that, I guess, can you explain a little bit? Can you give a short what that is, where those are? From a fuel rig?
Everybody turn around.
Like they're playing Candy Crush.
And had one more question about no, I'm kidding.
Please no. So the electric charging vehicles are, quite frankly, more or less a placeholder. We know as a fleet we are wanting to move in that direction. So we've maintained 65,000 for the 2 years. It has now hit our CIB. Previously, it had been a little bit more extended out. I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Wade, it is a cash-based program. So it is dependent upon available funding. But we are looking at putting them ideally throughout some of the city with a primary focus of supporting our needs as we're looking to modernize that fleet and see how that can evolve.
So is this like a lot of like individual plugins at, I mean, you know, West Evergy,
Yeah.
KPL, Evergy, or right over here, they have a couple outside that are on the, is that what we're looking at, like a whole thing like that, or is this simply plugins at city buildings for like 220 plugins?
It's definitely not 220 plugins, so it would be more of what you've seen. The specifics of it isn't yet defined, and quite frankly, there's a lot more grants that are now available for these type of upgrades to different areas and different buildings. So while they are still in there, because it is something we want to get to, we don't have specific details yet as to what that would look like.
Thank you.
Councilman Kell?
This may be more to Braxton. On the Bikeways master plan, is this just for new paths and things like that? Or can this be go back in safety issues with the paths that are already in place? Because I would love to see our paths and certain intersections have a push button light. Because if you go to 37th in Kansas down at the bottom of the hill there, no one stops at the bike path for the cyclists. And then I would almost like to see also the bike paths be patrolled a little bit, because those are the two safety issues I hear from people that use it, is that the intersections don't have buttons for them to use, and that sometimes they don't feel safe because people are camping in the in right next to the paths or hanging out on the paths. And so I just don't want to see something, throw money at something that people aren't going to use because they don't feel safe using it.
Director
Thank you,
Fyander.
I was going to say, thank you, Councilmember Patel. I will defer to Director Fyander to answer the question about the Bikeways master plan, and I will defer to the police chief to answer your questions relative to policing the trails.
Councilmember Kell, this is Director Fyander. In terms of the Bikeways master plan, that money that is in the CIP is match money that we use to go out and get grants to work on our on-street bike network. And so it is sales tax funds, so it could be used for repairing existing bikeway facilities. That is something that could be looked at, whether it's the crosswalk, the striping, or any of the conditions of existing facilities. So that is possible.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mhm. Further questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
This one covers all the different areas. I have appreciated in the past, you all have produced a sheet, generally one of the longer ones, that showed the differences between the proposed CIP and the prior year one. I know you've changed the formatting, so maybe that's the answer, but is there one somewhere and I just missed it, or?
We're actually preparing one, and we'll have it for you next week.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, Mr. Finder, a similar question to what Councilwoman Hiller had asked earlier about, I forget which project we're asking, but it looks like we've allocated like $500,000 a couple of years ago, and only $154,000 has been spent. Is there a need to keep, I mean, I guess the good thing is it's cash, it's JADO, but is this needed elsewhere, I guess is my only question. Do we need to allocate it every year if it goes unspent, or every other year?
For me or for Braxton?
Well, actually, for Mr. Fine, isn't
Or for
Mr.
Bill?
Finer the one who, yeah. I don't know, because it says Mark Schreiner, so it's like a under engineering, but I mean, I guess my question is there really not this much of this that we need? I mean, the county does all the trails, right? So this is just for little, I mean, it looks like it could be on road projects too, for maybe bike lanes and stuff on road projects, I don't know. But I guess my question would be, do they need this much money, or, you know, in 2 years we haven't been able to spend even half of it?
Deputy Mayor.
Yes. So the Bikeways master plan, this council actually approved the updated one about a year ago, I think. And before that, the MTPO spent their time working with the county and KDOT. And so some of those projects have just been delayed. Money been spent because other projects are being completed before the bike path itself is finished or as part of that project. I don't know if this includes it, but I'll give an example, which is probably wrong, is, you know, yes, 12th Street, right? I don't know if that's included in the master plan. I have to go back and refresh my memory on the master plan. But so some of those projects are just behind. Some of them are contingent upon county. And as Mr. Finder said, some of them are matching. So if we pull some of that back, then we have to look at the ripple effect of what we lose in terms of a matching offer. So that would be one thing we'd have to ask about if we wanted to take anything out of theirs. What would happen to that? That's kind of a convoluted answer, but.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Councilman Duncan, I just,
If it helps, I can try and answer a little bit more on that, Councilman Emerson. And the deputy mayor is correct. We've got, for instance, there's we have $1 million grant. It's over $1 million, but from KDOT, and we've got 3 big projects that are connecting to our downtown that have not been spent yet. So that's I believe it's 8th Street coming through downtown, 6th, no, not 6th Street, Kansas Avenue Bridge, some stuff in Noto along the river, and then also a connection to the Shunga Trail through the Monroe neighborhood in downtown. So I know I don't do the accounting, but I do know we've got some projects, some big significant projects that have not been spent yet.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I couldn't see that you were wanting to answer this because we have limited visuals here. And I really can't see who all else is online from staff, so apologize for not going to you for an answer. But as you stated, Deputy Mayor took the reins and ran with it.
All right.
That's good. Further questions? Seeing none? Stephen, if you want to proceed?
Mr. Mayor, if you're okay, we'll head towards the home stretch here with the last item, good governance. And I'm apologizing in advance to Director Biswell. We were not expecting to get this far through the book, so Mark may or may not be totally prepared for this. A lot of these items are IT related. The first line item, the Neptune 360 water meter application, Director Copley has made a presentation to council here recently about that program. Fleet replacement program. We have Hannah and Tony in the back if there's questions about the fleet replacement program. And then the rest of it we will go through is all IT. So if there's any questions on fleet, we can handle that now. Otherwise, we'll roll to IT.
Councilman Kell?
Well, I'm not sure if the ESRI falls under the IT aspect of things or not.
Yes, it does.
Okay, well, I'll wait for the IT aspect. Councilman Ortiz.
Councilman Ortiz.
Esri falls under TSG, but I can try to answer your questions.
On that, there's a yearly, yearly cost on that. Is that based off a contract for so many years, or is that what we're paying every year? And we're not, my thing is, it's a very valuable tool. I don't see it going away anytime soon or going anywhere else. So I don't know if that's a year-to-year contract that we're anticipating the cost, or if we did like a 10-year contract.
To be honest with you, I'd probably defer to Hannah on that.
So she just sent me a note. It's on a 3-year term.
Okay. I was just saying, longer term, maybe shorter cost. It's a program I'm very familiar with, so like I said, I don't see it going anywhere, and I feel it's municipality-wise, it's a great tool for us to have, but my thing is if we can get it cheaper, maybe looking at a longer-term contract for it.
The way ESRI has done their prices with municipal governments is based on the population size. So the 3-year term is fairly standard. There is escalation every year that we renew it. So we do have to flatten that out over a period of time and spread it back out. But it is an enterprise-wide license. So we use it for obviously all of our mapping, but we've also recently started taking a wider advantage of extra applications such as their survey tools.
I just trying to see if we can save some money by, going longer term on it.
Unfortunately, and fortunately, our population just exceeds the $125,000 mark, which is their threshold for tiered pricing. So we did attempt to negotiate with them, but we are, just slightly over that mark.
That's good.
I said fortunately, unfortunately. It would have saved us a little bit, but it is great that we've still exceeded that threshold.
Thank you.
Further questions?
I think Councilman Ortiz had her hand up for a second.
Just scratch your nose.
Okay.
Councilman Dobler.
Are we on IT now? Is that?
Yes, sir.
So we've still got an AS400?
We
Yes,
do
sir.
have,
Mark?
Yes, sir.
Is that going to go away anytime soon? Or we got the VHS and the 8 tracks out?
Yeah, we've got some archived information on there that we're probably going to have to keep for some period of time.
Okay. That makes sense. Thanks.
We typically call it legacy information.
Yeah.
Further question? Oh, Deputy Mayor.
So a few months back, we had a security briefing that looked at some of the IT issues. I'm just curious as to any of those recommendations have been built into this CIP. I know part of that was a staffing stuff, which will be more budget, but in terms of the hardware, software issues, have we taken any of those recommendations and tried to integrate them into anything we're doing moving forward? this year?
Yeah. Yes, they have been.
Okay, great.
Steve?
Any other IT questions?
Councilman Hillard?
Okay, I'm puzzled. If we're talking about moving to progressively to cloud software, perhaps even so we don't have laptops or hard drives at our desks, if the AS400s are just being used to archive data, and it seems like we've had conversations before about having even redundant backups in different places for security reasons, why would we need to keep an AS400 just for archiving?
Mark, this is the old utility billing system, correct?
That's a combination of utility billing, and we also have some police department records that we're keeping on AS400.
The process of moving those is very expensive and time encompassing, and so we will gradually migrate to that, but it's not something we can just switch over overnight. It's pretty intensive in pulling that out of the archives.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Seeing no questions, Steve, you'll proceed.
Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you, I'll turn it back over to the city manager because have completed the review.
Mayor, governing body, as I said when we started, this is extremely exciting stuff. And our staff has done, I think staff's done an excellent job in preparing material, and we're always available for additional follow-up questions, which I assume will be coming. I've made extensive notes as well as some of the other staff members, and we'll get those questions that were posed that we weren't able to answer back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you all. I have to admit that since coming on the council, I've seen improvements and changes, and I really do think that this advanced discussion and review sure helps us when we get into a full council meeting and start to make decisions. A lot of discussion can be had here and move those meetings forward without a lot of delay. So I thank you all for everything you presented, and for those who I can't see on the monitor, I appreciate your participation as well. If there's nothing further, I would close this meeting.